Okay.
It is recording.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Can I have an open meeting?
Sure. Alden? Here. Paddock?
Here.
Christensen?
Here.
Allen?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Walton? Burns.
Yes. Open meeting compliance check.
The notice was posted in the Normal City and the Concord Municipal Building on
Okay, thank you. First order of business, I'd like to move to approve the previous meeting minutes from the committee of the whole, October 14th, 2021. Second. Second by trustee Garland. Any questions? Clerk, please call for the vote.
Alden? Yes. Brenner?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Garland?
Yes.
Spencer?
Yes.
Walton?
Yes.
Burns.
Yes. I'd like to move to suspend the rules of order for citizens to speak on agenda items after each committee report. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Brenner. Madam Clerk, please call for the vote.
Alden?
Yes.
Brenner?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Garland?
Yes.
Spencer?
Yes.
Walton?
Yes.
Burns.
Yes. All right, finance and administration bills over 1,000 we passed around for approval. Request to alter boat wake hours. This came at the request initially at the Lake District meeting. Comments?
I would say I'm not for it. I don't think the people that were requesting it are here, so I see no issue.
I don't like all the late hours. I don't think they have to be every single day. You know, I mean, till sunset. That's my opinion.
I don't have a problem with 9 o'clock, pushing it to 9 o'clock, and maybe couple extra days sunset. I'm not all for 6 out of 7 days of being sunset. I'm a big fan of being a win-win on both sides. I would be up for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Monday, maybe 9 to sunset. The other days would be Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 9 to 6 or whatnot. I wouldn't mind going for that.
You have a boat, I just was wondering, I would think the hours during the week, do they run that way? Would they run that way? Like Wednesday, Tuesday, and Monday? And
Right now, we've got Mondays until, it goes until 7.
Right.
Tuesday, 8:30, Wednesday, 7, Thursdays, 8:30, and then Friday, 7.
You're essentially taking 13 hours away from government.
I think realistically, we should move it to the survey portion of our, which will be next year, add it as a question, and leave it up to the general public to decide what to do.
Anybody else?
I was emailed by somebody who lives in our community who couldn't be here tonight, who brought up the survey that was done on the PHLI Facebook page, where there were 53 votes against changing the hours and 35 votes for changing the hours. And if you look at the total hours of daylight per day, averaging at like 15 hours of daylight per day during the summer months, as of right now, there's 62.5% more daylight wake hours than daylight no wake hours. Obviously, there's a lot of no wake hours in the dark, but not as many people, want to kayak in the dark, things like that. So yeah, they couldn't be here tonight, but they had asked that I share that information with you. It seems like our hours are pretty similar to hours of other lakes in the area, and I think it's a great idea, especially considering we have two people in the audience tonight. I agree with and pushing it to the survey just so we can actually get a good feel for what all of our citizens want.
I also need to express too that having 9 a.m. to sunset 6 out of the 7 days a week, we are seeing areas around the lake with major erosion happening where we're losing land, especially in the West Bay. And I just don't think that at this particular time, having those hours, 6 out of the 7 days with all the, with the wakeboards and whatnot, I don't think it's a good idea to have 6 out of the 7 days that length of time.
Any other comments? Okay, here's mine. First of all, this request came from a small portion of the community. This initially, like I said, it came from the Lake District meeting, the end of the Lake District meeting. I do want to caution anybody that would think of changing them, that 13-hour difference is going to affect, whether it's drastically going to affect, but it's going to affect to the positive side, an erosion issue, which Trustee Garland had mentioned, and it's also going to turn up the bottom of the lake, so you're going to have more weeds, and we always hear about weeds floating at Lake District. So you're going to have more of that, and then you're going to hear requests that we increase somehow expenditures for harvesting, and the Lake District budget does not have the funds to do that. The Lake District is paid by the entire community, so leading up to, as I agree with Trustee Albert and Trustee Spencer, that this would be an ideal question to go on our 4-year survey that we send the entire community. If they expressed a positive or negative interest in increasing the wake hours of the lake, and furthermore, Hooker Lake, which a lot of people think is under the jurisdiction of Paddock Lake, it isn't. It's under the jurisdiction of Salem Lake, and it mimics what we have on Paddock. So again, I would agree with Trustee Spencer and Albert. This is a great question to put towards our survey, which will be next year.
That is correct.
So I know we got 3. I don't know, Kathy.
I'm done with the survey.
Okay. What about? Okay, so the consensus is that this would be an ideal survey question. Okay. Any other comments before we move on? Okay. Golf cart ordinance. All right, in going through this, I think in the staff report, it gives a real quick yet concise answer to the issues at hand, which have been brought to the board's attention. And it's 248th Avenue, 236th Avenue, which up till now are off limits unless you're traversing it, going from a secondary street to a secondary street, which pose problems for residents that live on those 2 streets. And I think though it really didn't draft effectively into the ordinance, in fact, initially the concern was, given that concern was, well, if you live on those streets, you obviously have to get to the route, so you're made a kind of a give me to get there. But because it's not cut and dry in the ordinance, if people are found on it, they've been asked to stay out. So with that understanding, the simple answer is just to vacate that, delete that part of the ordinance, make 236 and 248 allowable to golf cart traffic. The question that brings up, in my opinion, is if we do that, then there is a 4403H, no golf cart shall operate on a pedestrian walkway, bike path, multi-use path, sidewalks. 248 and 236 both have bike paths or walk paths. So if we're going to allow traffic on 236 and 248, we need to further identify if they're to be operated on those two, is it in the through traffic lane? And then that, in my opinion, has conflict with paragraph H, or does not have conflict with paragraph H. Or are they allowed to ride in the bike lane, which does have conflict?
My understanding, my thought would be is that they would stay out of the bicycle, just like they would stay off the sidewalk in the parkway. You know, we have 30 lane miles. We have 36.8 lane miles of road in the village. And the majority of those lane miles are traversed on the pavement in the lane itself, not on the shoulder, not in the grass. And I would think that with that being said, and that the majority of the traffic is in the lane, the golf cart would stay in the lane on 248 as well, and on 236, in the lane, not in the bicycle lane, subsequent side bicycle lane. And I think it's something that we could amend our, obviously, it stay the same in the ordinance, but we could place a sign at both ends of 236 and 248. Golf carts stay out of the bicycle lane. It could be publicly educated at the time they're getting their permits. I do believe that our residents would follow. On 236, yes. It only comes up. Yeah, from one end to the other.
Yeah, both sides.
But I guess maybe I'm misunderstanding what the gentleman was asking for. He wasn't asking, I have a problem with golf carts on 236 and 248. Those are our two main drags coming in. I live on 244 where a lot of golf carts, and I don't have a problem with them. You know, they all follow the rules and everything, but just trying to get through these small narrow roads with golf carts and cars, 236 and 248 are our main entrances in and out of this village. To have to deal with golf carts, being able just to ride up and down, I have a problem with that. My understanding was he was looking at the exception for those to get to a side road where they wouldn't be ticketed or something. I think we need to look at some
Trustee
other way.
Christensen, you're absolutely right. That one individual that was here expressing the interest to the board, that was his concern. We've had multiple people as they come in to get their golf cart licenses and communicate with us about the driving on 236 and 248. And several of them have made comment that there's businesses at the end of 248 that they would frequent, but they can't get to it. There's areas on 74th to 246 they can't get to because of 248 being part of the maneuverability. And then the other thing that I really have an issue with banning them on 236 is that here we are a village hall open to business and to serve the community, but they can have a golf cart and drive it all over the village, but they can't come to our hall. And so yes, there's been one individual that expressed his concern about gaining access from his home to the next available street. But there's been many more that asked, why can't you just use 236 and 248? I wish the sheriff's deputy was here tonight to express his concern. 3 deputies have indicated that it is just difficult for them to enforce something of what we just talked about. You're allowed to leave your home and go 1 block to get onto a lane and maneuver in the side streets, the true collector streets. It's difficult for them to do an enforcement because they see people on 248 and 236 and they just go to 1 extra street and get off. So the sheriff's department's requested at least these 3 deputies was, if you're going to change it, let them drive on the 2 roads. They're not causing that big of an issue. The other concern that, just a thought, is that by us keeping them off 248 and 236, specifically on the east side, keeping golf cart traffic from the entire Dell subdivision off 236 puts a burden as you just indicated, puts a burden on neighboring streets of having extra traffic. So all the traffic that could be using 236 is now on 238, 235th, and it seems to be an increase in traffic for those people because one road has been closed. Now, it's like anything else, you close a road and everybody else gets one with the traffic.
Well, then if I can make another point then on that, I would rather have the brunt of the traffic on a slow moving road than on 236. I've driven down 236. You get somebody who's parked right there, I've had to go around them and be on the other side of the lane. You have golf carts going down there. People are flying down that road. They're flying down 248. It happens. I think that we're looking at, we haven't had any problems with accidents with the golf carts or anything like that in the village, as far as I know. But I think opening up those two main driveways, we are going to have something happen. That would be my biggest concern. I will not go for this, personally.
But why can't the people that are riding up and down these two roads, why can't they use a car and go to the store? You mentioned about, oh, you know, they want to get to one of the stores, like grocery store or something. They can't get down there. Well, use your car. Why do you get to work? You don't take your golf cart to work.
I don't really want to get in my car if I work the beach on a Sunday. I'm not quite soaking wet. My bottoms are wet. And I want to run up to Century. And I've gone, I'll be honest, probably not here. Left my house on 72nd Street. And I want to go to Sicko, which I can see Sicko from my house. I don't want to go all the way down to 250th, go all the way up, and I do. But it is much quicker to go up the 2 blocks. And I'll sit at the stop sign, a car comes by, I fly them all by until the road is clear, and then I'll go.
And then we're also seeing, this has been brought up with several PHLA meetings this year, that because at 248 over by McClellan Park, because they've enforced not being on 248, non-PHLA members who don't want to go all the way down are cutting in and through the South Channel properties to get to like Sitco or whatnot. So we're hearing about some property damage from that aspect.
But that doesn't mean that we change or make it not safe for everyone else in the village. That just means then that the golf cart owners are not following the rules. That's basically what I'm hearing, is the golf cart owners then are not following the rules because they don't want to follow the rules. I don't necessarily want to stop when a train is coming, but I have to stop. You know, I just don't see this. I think we're going to have a lot of issues if we open up to the golf carts.
We do have instruction on that golf carts should be on the right of way for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other motor vehicles. And I do the same thing on my golf cart. If I see a car coming up behind me, I pull over and I leave them by and I let them go. But if you think about how fast the golf cart can go, I mean, I'm trying to look where it is, but I believe the ordinance says that it can't go faster than 20 miles an hour. I mean, I live on 74th Street and our speed limit is 15 miles an hour. So if golf carts are going relatively the same speed that a car should be going, a car is going faster than a golf cart, chances are they're speeding, and that's a separate problem. So from that standpoint, I mean, it sounds like it's not necessarily the, you know, golf carts being on roads, it's just people in general not following speed limits and not being safe, whether they're in a car or a golf cart. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, first of all, some very good arguments on both sides of the issue. It appears to be clear that to combat the problem, the easy answer would be to just make an allowance to run on these 2 roads with keeping H in the ordinance so that they would be in the lane of traffic, which would then present another thought of on every road, with the exception of 248, you have the ability to go around the golf in most cases. Yeah, I would agree with trustee Christensen that 236 is a unique road. The terrain is not straight, flat, well, straight, but it's not flat by any means. So that causes some complexities. But as a general argument, you have the ability to go around. So if the golf cart's in a lane of traffic on 248, you don't have that luxury because it's a parkway. You have an island. You can't go up and over the curb and go around it. And so I'm glad trustee Albert brought up paragraph M, because I was kind of waiting to see how people interpreted that. If they saw a car behind them and they were on 248, would they pull over? And it sounds like your interpretation is yes, they would. My question is, does it need to be more defined to make sure that they do? Because then that would eliminate the potential passage issue on 248. Now, all that said and done, I agree with trustee Christensen that when you put golf carts on a major roadway, it just may seem like a recipe for a disaster, a collision, an accident, potential liability risk. But on the same token, like trustee Alberg said, our speed limits are 25. Okay, now granted, that doesn't mean people go 25, but they're 25. If they're going over 25, they're breaking our word. So if you've got two vehicles going roughly the same speed, granted the heavier ones still has the opportunity to be damaged if there's a collision. So I agree with you in that context, but in saying that, knowing that the concern is residents that live on these two streets want the ability to utilize a golf cart in the same full function that somebody living on your street or my street would, where we don't have those conflicts. So I guess the question would be, if you keep them off those two roads, then how do you address the people that live on those two roads?
But our current ordinance right now does not keep them completely off those roads. The way the ordinance reads is they can take that road to the next side street. So it's not limiting their ability to get around the village. What it's doing is it's not giving them a direct shot to where they want to go. So it's not limiting where they can go in the village. It's limiting the way they want to get there.
I agree with
Well, I'd like to get over to the other side of the lake here without going all around the lake.
Yeah.
Put a bridge across the lake for me. It doesn't work that way. Yes.
We did, and I help me out, anybody where that paragraph is.
Paragraph G, this is what Bob Glenn was bringing up, is the interpretation that Kathy just gave is not the same interpretation that law enforcement is utilizing. If you read paragraph G, where it's lined out, says no golf cart shall operate on village road known as 236 Avenue or 248. There's nowhere in that paragraph that gives exception to someone who resides on those roads.
To try to get to a crossroad.
So it doesn't give that exception.
Right, that's what I'm saying is what,
The way to put it in is, if you drive on that road, you will be ticketed.
right. And that's why I thought this whole thing was to clear that up so that somebody who lived on 236 could use 236 to get to the next side road, to make it clearer for law enforcement. And that was my impression is why we were bringing this to the table, not to change.
That was, as Commissioner,
Right.
that was the concern of Mr. Point when he was in the audience. There has been, I am aware, there has been concerns about Sheriff's Department as far as 248. The exception to paragraph 3G is that they can cross at a perpendicular angle on those two roads. So they can cross over those roads. But again, it doesn't necessarily address, if you live in the middle of the block, the ordinance allows you to cross over, or the road allows you to cross over, but doesn't allow you to get to the road, it allow you to cross. So my question is, you know, if you can find some language to allow that, then I think we're addressing both issues. And yeah, I agree with you, Trustee Christensen, that there's an allowance for travel in the village. It just may not be the way they want to go or the fastest route to get there. And, you know, you gave some great examples of how we deal with that every day, just in driving and traffic. So my question to the board is, what would be the appropriate language to put into paragraph G to make an allowance for the residents that live on those two roads to still utilize their cart to get to where they can cross into a secondary road. And then with that in mind, you know, 236, if you're on the east side of the village, you want to get to the west side of the village, you're going to have to get on 236.
Well,
Yeah.
If I can add one more thing too, and I think that the majority of the residents that I've spoken to personally about wanting to have 248 and 236 open up, they're not people who just want to go for a joyride down the road because they can. They're people who just want to hop on it for a block, like hop on 248 between 72nd and 74th, just to make that a little bit more convenient, or hop on, like you said, 236 the block down there. I mean, I don't think residents want it open just so they can do whatever they want to just drive back and forth going for a joyride. It's just to make, you know, a few block little segments easier to get from point A to point B.
But if it was open, let's face it, it's going to turn into a convenience issue. So, I mean, really what it comes down to is you can't isolate little segments of the roadways that are allowable and those that aren't. So it comes down to it's either all or nothing. You can't pick and choose how you want to do this because let's face it, golf cart is not an essential tool for travel. So, so the way I see it is you open up both roads, or you come up with language to allow people that live on both of those roads the ability to get to the secondary roads, and then everything would be status quo. That's my.
I think if you're going along with those lines, your comment earlier would be crafted to go under section G, where it says the exception would be as follows. One would be golf carts are permitted to cross 236 and 248 at a perpendicular angle. Those property owners with golf carts, I'm paraphrasing here, those property owners owning golf carts or having registered golf carts, those properties adjacent to 236 and 248 with golf carts are permitted to transverse the respective street to the next available road. The next available golf cart trail road.
Well, that's every road. There's no trail. It's every road.
We're splitting hairs.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to say.
Golf cart path.
I think it's,
Golf
yeah,
cart trail.
it's, you know.
Road accepting.
If you have the exception is if you're a resident of these two roads, you have the ability to utilize your golf cart to a perpendicular road.
In access to a road.
Once you're on a perpendicular road, you can go any way you want because.
Well, that would be the language if everyone would agree. We'll have it back before you in December.
And then where this final front Bob place, I don't like this house, I don't reside on the street.
Right.
Yeah.
Same thing I was just thinking.
I was going to bring that up because that just opens another can.
Then you have language to talk about that, and then becoming too the law enforcement,
Yep.
keep it up, you might as well just.
So it's an extremely valid point.
That's why to the village hall. I mean,
That's why it's, you know, crafting the language to allow residents to use golf carts. However many actually, I don't know how many number of people we're actually talking about when we isolate those two roads out. But to draft language so that they can allow it, but then they're the exception and nobody else can do it, then that's why this small conversation just now has led me to believe that it comes down to you either keep it the same and they're not on it, or you change it and they're on it. And that's it. It makes it easier for law enforcement. It takes all these questions out of it, with the exception of potential accidents. But that's a potential at every road. Because the speed limit's the same on 248 as it is on 247, 6 and all the way down, with the exception of park roads. Below. So I'm glad we had this conversation, because what we've done is we've weeded out how are we going to pick and choose how this is going to work. It's just real simple. You allow them or you don't allow them. Period. That's the way I see it.
I feel like we have some other good ordinances in here that, you know, help, like the fact that you do have to carry insurance to have a golf cart. I mean, that helps with some of the liabilities there. And like I mentioned before, the speed limit. I mean, we have some other good parts of this ordinance that I think, if people are following the full ordinance, should not be an issue. And, you know, and these can still be enforced by our patrol officers as well, just making sure, you know, people are driving safely, that nobody under the age of 16, right? There's some great information in here, and I think that as long as everybody's following all the rules, which they're agreeing to when they sign up for their permit, and it can be enforced, then, you know, that helps eliminate some of the concerns.
And I agree. I agree with that.
Has
So,
Mr. Point's been the only issue that has come forward?
No.
no, we had all kinds of.
Virtually any, and you can ask Marlon sitting here, virtually anybody that applies for a golf cart permit balks at the restriction of 248 and 236.
A lot of people want to come.
Yeah, they want to come here to the village hall.
Got a car?
So, again, to recap, I think it comes down to you allow them or you don't allow them. I just like a consensus.
And I need some direction. What do you want me to do? Write the ordinance for next month, or?
I'm for allowing all. I actually have no issues with the golf carts. I sat there Halloween, handed out candy, and there was tractors and four-wheelers and the vehicle that full trailer was driving down the road. Golf carts.
Halloween's a little bit different than every.
I live on 72nd. I see golf carts all
Right,
day,
because
every
they're
day,
allowed on 72nd.
and they're going to Century, and I've never had a traffic issue with them.
And your road's hilly too.
My road-
And sh- and-
I don't throw fair for golf carts because it's the way to do
Right, and I don't have a problem with them where we had agreed for them to be.
So
I'm
is
against.
mine, because we're not allowed to 248, so.
But I'm for open.
I'm against.
Okay.
I'm for it.
I'm against.
Against.
We're gonna do this again.
Yeah.
It comes down to me.
But it did happen.
It comes down to me again. Well, for half of you, you're not gonna want to hear this, but to make this easy on law enforcement, to appease the residents that own golf carts on these two roads, and just to make the overall flow easier, I'm in favor of just opening those two roads. As Trustee Alberg had pointed out, when we drafted this ordinance, we tried to think of every potential angle so that everybody could safely operate these vehicles on all roadways. The only reason the two exceptions were is because they were the most heavily traveled. And now we find that people are traveling on them anyhow, but we haven't had any accidents.
I'm going to just make two more points.
Sure.
the 2 points were, you're right, we did spend a lot of time talking about this, drafting this to make it the safest, and that's why we decided there was not gonna be golf carts on 236 and 248. Secondly, are we gonna come back and change this when the vast number of people who are not operating golf carts come in here complaining because golf carts are running down 248 and 236 and there's a problem? Are we going to then come back to the table and change this yet again? I personally, if it's a split decision like this, think we really need to really think about this and really talk about it and maybe hold off one more month, since nobody's going to be driving their golf carts in December and January. Maybe some of these will, but
They can't,
really,
by ordinance.
okay, by ordinance they can't, but really sit down and think about this and talk this through and see if there's some other options to make it safe for everyone in this village. How many golf cart registrations do we currently have?
64.
So that's 64 residents in the village of Paddock Lake that own a golf cart. Not all 64 want to drive down 248 or 236. So I think we're making an exception for a small portion of this village. And I don't want to have to come back and readdress this again.
I don't think.
Because we've had people complaining. And no, I think you will have people
I
complain. You
didn't
get,
finish my comment.
sorry. Go ahead, I'm done, those were my points.
My comment was, you know, if we open up these two remaining roads, golf cart traffic, as small as it is, on these two roads versus golf cart traffic on any other road, what's the difference? What complaints do you think you're going to be feeling?
The fact that these are the main entrances in and out of this village for people.
I have kids walking down 248 already that use the side of the road, anything else, I don't think, for everything else, there's bike lanes, everything else, having a golf cart is no different than having a bike go down that road.
No, because they're going down the middle of the road. And I mean, honestly, I was against the golf carts in the beginning. I'll be completely honest about that. I was completely against it. Once we did put it through and I saw the number of people that were using the golf carts, for the most part, I would say most people are following the rules. But I see them because they're going down to Senior Citizen Park or they're going over to, what is that beach? Wherever they're going, over on the other side, around the lake there. I see them, they drive down my street all the time. The vast majority, and I will give you that, follow the rules and do what they're supposed to do. But there is a significant handful that is not. That there's kids driving these things. The law enforcement can't be all over this village. And there was a reason why in the beginning that we made 236 and 248 not usable for golf carts. That is the main drag into the village, in and out on both ends. That's my biggest problem, is the safety of all of this. Now, I'm all for the golf carts. I see people use them. I think it's great that they're using them. They drive down my street constantly. I don't have a problem with that. But I do have a problem with the safety issue of 248 and 236. And like you said, how many are on 236, living on 236? They just brought up the point. They go from house to house. And so it's not just the people that are living on 236 that are going to use 236 or 248. It's all of them. So that's,
Well,
I think we really need to think about it before we actually and really discuss it, I guess, further, come up with other ideas before we do something this drastic, because I don't want to have to come back and have to change this again.
and none of us want to come back and rehash what we just spent, upwards of a half hour hashing out.
That's what we're
And,
supposed to do.
and that's the point we're hashing it out tonight, is to look at every possible angle, and everybody's brought up some good detail, and that helps further the discussion. It also furthers the conclusion that it's either all or nothing. You can't segment certain little areas. You can, if you want to get extreme, you can just say, the heck with all of it, and they're all gone, and we don't even have to worry about it. And of course, you are going to have some more. So again, the simplest answer, I don't foresee ramifications of it as you do. Simply because 248 is the same speed limit as all the other roads. The volume is higher, I will give you that. The volume is higher, but ideally, we're only talking about really the people that live on these two roads. So you factor that into the actual traffic.
How do you figure you're only factoring in the two people?
Because
that live on the road?
that's who it's directly.
It's affecting anybody coming into the village, who lives in the village.
I'm talking about owners of cars.
But it's not only affecting them. If it were only affecting them, then I'd like to see the number of how many people on 248 actually own a golf cart. I want to see then the numbers of the people on 236 who actually own a golf cart. If that's your
That
point,
would be.
then I'd like to see how many people on those streets actually use it. I'm talking about, what about the rest of the village, not the 60 some people that own a golf cart? What about the rest of the village that don't own a golf cart, that don't want to see golf carts driving down 248 or 236?
I would say that they would fall into the same group of the people that live on 242nd or 67th or any other road that would favor not having golf carts.
Right, but there's a reason why we didn't have them initially going down that street.
And I realize.
And we're abandoning
because
that.
we were both
safety
there when
issue.
it was written. I realized that. But you have to admit, when we drafted, we kind of forecasted that this was a potential hole in the ordinance. That, well, at least I will make my comment that I did, because you had no way for the residents to really get there. Are we talking about a small amount of people? Yes, and I think that favors the argument to allow them to have the ability to use their golf cart and the same flexibility that everyone else. So, yeah, it doesn't change my opinion of it's either all or nothing. Open them or don't open them. If we don't open them, then the conversation's over, and we can move on and leave everything the way it is. But
I think traffic on 248 is highly congested. 236, I don't think. As long as I've lived here over 40 years. I'm just glad we have no golf carts on my side of the lake.
yeah, I mean, there's a main road in and out.
And it's a narrow road, 236. That is a narrow road. I would have more concern about 236 and the safety issue than I do 248. As far as any safety issues, because of the narrowness of 236.
Well, all the sub paragraphs in this ordinance, they apply to every road that they're allowed on. So whether you apply it to 248 or you apply it to 247 or any other road, the ordinance still stands. It's still in a protective nature to ward off these issues that you're bringing up. So, I mean, if they're safe enough to drive on one road, if we're going to move forward with doing something, and the concern is to open these two roads, I don't have an issue. And I hate to be tiebreakers, but I get 7 people. So I see the consensus was tied. I broke that tie. So the majority of the board would elect to allow those 2 roads to open up the golf cart use. With that being said, since we're going to be adjusting this, is there any comment on the time frame? As I can tell you, this past weekend, I think I counted about 12 violations of golf cart use because it was after November 1st.
So that I get
So-
taken off.
Especially if the weather holds.
It's predicated on the weather, yeah.
If you're on EMF.
No, yeah,
On EMF, the people should remain seated at all times, while the number of occupants in the golf cart shall be limited to the number of adult persons for the individual seating is not. I've seen kids hanging off. Now, you're behind that golf cart. And this kid's hanging off and falls off. I don't want to be that person. And I know that's their fault, you know, for the kids hanging on the golf cart.
and I want to profit that everyone that picks up the golf cart permit gets a copy of this ordinance. They're responsible to read the ordinance, understand it. They have questions, ask questions, get answers to them. So if they're in violation of the ordinance, then they're in violation of an ordinance and they should be ticketed appropriately.
But we've seen 0 tickets for golf carts. 0. So if you have trustees that live on the west side of the village, trustees that live here on the east side of the village, and you're seeing multiple violations of these golf carts, and we see 0 traffic violations, there's a problem. And that's, again, where another reason why I have an issue of opening this up is if you see these violations and nothing's being done about it, then you go and open it up even more for more of this. That's where, and I'm like, Gloria, I don't want to be behind that golf cart in my car and somebody fall off of it. So, you know, there's where I have a big problem. And I know, I know exactly what you're gonna say. That could happen right on your street. Yes, you're absolutely right, it could.
That actually wasn't what I was going to say. What I was going to say is, if you find somebody doing that, that's why the ordinance is drafted to prohibit it. To go on your question of, actually, we do have some golf cart violations, I think, coming up in this month's police report. And that's because law enforcement was not necessarily pressured to pay attention to golf cart use. That's why there was no, I kid you not, they weren't. And we've had these discussions before, and they need to be more appropriate to what's going on in the streets with these golf carts to address these. All we hear about is all these horror stories, but we never see any citations. So you say, well, are these really horror stories?
To put it all on law enforcement is not right either. It's the responsibility, just like you were saying this whole time with arguments, it's the responsibility of the golf cart owners.
Absolutely.
So.
But how do you combat it? For those that choose to do these crazy things, how do you combat it? You have an ordinance that says you can't do it. It's like everything else. When you have something that isn't working right, so you just make a law to say you can't do it. Okay, well, that's not the answer to the question, because who's going to enforce it? If you have a law and it's not enforced, you might as well not even have a law, right?
No, I agree with that.
So this is a matter of
All on law
enforcing
enforcement.
written ordinances that we've come up with. So as long as they're enforced, issues like this will diminish.
No, I
Given
agree.
given the capacity that we have with law enforcement.
I agree with you. Part of it is law enforcement, but to put it all on law enforcement was my.
Well, and.
So, yes.
Sorry. I was just gonna add too, that it sounds like law enforcement has spent a decent chunk of time enforcing just 248 and 236. And I agree that absolutely is a safety concern, being off of that. So I hope that if we open up 248 and 236, then there would be additional time taken away from that enforcement and they could focus on, the more pressing issues like, kids under 16 driving. I've seen that. I had an 8-year-old yell at my dad last year who was driving a golf cart by himself. I mean, there are definite other concerns that I think absolutely should be the focus of law enforcement and take their focus off of which streets we can and can't drive on.
That's about.
I think you put those golf carts on 248 or 236 are gonna be seen more by law enforcement and get them ticketed.
If I can just add that law enforcement is multiple areas or ways of getting compliance. They communicate with somebody for compliance, they can write citations, they can have a presence to communicate proper use of a motor vehicle or a golf cart. Not all contact with the golf cart owners has been by way of citation. We have a resident in the audience, two residents here, that have been spoke to multiple times by law enforcement about being on the wrong road, operating inappropriately, whatever the case is. That's a means of enforcement. Citation is not the end all. And when you're dealing with a municipality that's 3,000 people, the residents of the community, when it comes to dealing with golf carts, which is not a major, it's not a statute. The ordinance they're enforcing, it's not a state statute, it's a local ordinance. They use a little bit of soft touch in terms of getting compliance, which is communication, presence, not necessarily written citation. I just wanted to throw that out.
That's a good point. That just because we see 0 citations issue does not imply that the sheriff's department is doing absolutely nothing about potential violations or taking the more soft shoe approach of doing a verbal warning versus. So with the change in order here on the ordinance, again, my question is, the operating timeframe is from April 1st to November 1st. Is there any feeling on changing that from April 1st to December?
Oh, snow and ice and everything else. That's nuts.
Well,
That's nuts.
okay. What about?
I think driving a lot of folks. I think I can take a 2-wheel drive S10 with no weight in the back, the truck be more dangerous than a golf cart. So I just don't care if the golf carts are driving on the road year round. I see no problem with that. To be honest with you.
I would like to see March through December, personally.
I look at right now, the weather's just about to start turning cold, so people will stop there. You're right. Golf carts were out and about, so 75 degrees outside, they're gonna be out and about. The law enforcement's not gonna pull them over because they're not gonna have the headache of getting yelled at over a golf cart or a small ordinance or small fine. I just don't see an issue with opening them up. I really honestly don't. And I think out of all of us, I live on the road with the most golf cart traffic. So,
I think I might, well, you may have more than that. I'm not in favor of not having an operating season. I just, when this was originally drafted, the reason we initially said November 1st is because the whole premise of the golf cart concern was that specifically people that had boats in either PHLA, North Beach, specifically those two were the majority of the concern, that there's no place to park a car. And you really can't walk down to your boat with all the stuff you need. A golf cart was an efficiency conveyance to get everything down there. And all the boats, the people that have boats, they know that the boats got to be out of the lake on November 1st. So November 1st seemed like the logical date to say, for golf cart use, because the boats are done, right? So that's how the November 1st came. April 1st is we're just typically using, the roads are usually clear on the 1st of April. The road salt's gone, the snow's gone, the ice is gone, and then you can safely operate. So if we're going to change it, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem moving it to December 1st, but I wouldn't want to move it closer in the spring, because our winters start late and end late. Or did I say spring or our winters? So if it's to be changed, I'm perfectly fine with the way it is. This year was a weird year for many, many, many reasons, but the weather, yeah, we had some nice weather. So that's the reason I brought it up, is because we had warm weather now, so it's like, this is potential for things to come as well. So.
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, I think this year, my first boat ride of the year was like March 22nd or something like that. So I feel like it kind of depends on the weather we have. I mean, we had 70-degree days this week, and we also have a golf cart going around. So, I personally wouldn't see an issue with adding like a month to either side of that, but then maybe adding something about like, except when there's a declaration of a snow emergency. You really don't know what you're gonna get with the months on either side. But we have times when it's 80 degrees or times when it's snowing on the months on either side. So I think maybe, adding a month on either side, but adding in, snow emergency shutdown, something like that, I think could be a good compromise.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think as a golf cart owner, I think many golf cart owners are knowledgeable enough to not be out on the roads in the winter time or the summertime when it's raining. I don't see many golf carts when it's raining. I think they're knowledgeable enough to know that if there's heavy snow or ice on the roads in November, December, that discretion is.
But when it's cold out,
I'm
like
sorry,
it's cold.
trust me, Brendan.
I just can't believe it. If you want to have all those regulations in the wintertime too, with the golf cart.
Why not? If the roads are dry, we can, and if it's cold, you can easily bundle up and go for a nice golf cart ride throughout the day. I don't see a problem with it.
We've got a full cover for ours, and you put a.
I'm starting to see a lot of
Here,
that now too.
and a lot of them are being built in now. Aren't we? It's a clear cover, we strap it on, we do it in the summertime too, it rolls up into itself, but.
Okay, now with that being said, that's where I have the problem. Because I think too, not only did we put that limit, that season limit on there because of when boats typically go in and boats typically come out, we were also looking at the fact that our streets are narrow, plows need to go down. Now, you may not go out in the winter and drive yours. You may. And what about the plows that need to get through? Golf carts are now on the road. Do we want our public works people to have to go around golf cart people, worry about golf carts if there is a snow emergency? Because some of you will, and I'm not saying all, will follow and not go out when it's a snow emergency.
Right.
But there will be those that do. I say we leave it the way it is. That's all I have to say. But
And when this was crafted, when this ordinance was crafted, Mr. Christensen and So I think Trustee Brennan helped draft this word. And you're absolutely correct. That's why we chose those dates. Again, the reason I bring it up is because of what I saw this year. It's not that I'm pressing to do it one way or the other. But if it stays the same, I am perfectly happy with it. Yeah, we're redrafting this anyhow. This is the time to make changes.
I'm for that. Like I said, like these are, I hear these ladies' complaints that they're complaining about the golf cart starting on the road. But our ordinance also states that these people that are operating these are licensed drivers by the state of Wisconsin. So we're essentially calling them out for their driving skills. And it doesn't matter if I've driven every vehicle on this planet, including a tank. And there is no difference between a golf cart and a Ford Fiesta. There's no difference between a golf cart and a four-wheeler.
But there's a difference between a golf cart and an 8-year-old driving it,
Well,
and
no,
a 13-year-old driving it, because they are not licensed
Our
drivers.
ordinance states that it must be a 16-year-old.
I get it, Bob, but that's not what's happening.
Well, you got an 8-year-old drive a car and drive on the road. We had one on 94 just like a month and a half ago, got pulled over by 8 squad cars. He took his mom's car for a joyride. We cannot decide that ordinances are going to control what people do outside of this room. We can write all the ordinances we want. An 8-year-old sitting in his mom's living room right now can decide what he wants to do, when he wants to do it. He's not going to care what any of our opinions are. If he wants to break the law, he's going to break the law. We can scream and shout and say all we want, but that kid's going to get up and go do it.
So then why have any ordinances at all if we're gonna use your logic?
Well, I'm
Because that's
what we're doing.
ridiculous. I mean, really.
But we
I mean,
have,
that's ridiculous logic.
we have licensed operators. Our ordinance says that licensed operators must be operating the golf carts. If they're not, that's not our responsibility. That's upon their parents, it's upon law enforcement if they see it. It's not our responsibility in this room. We did our responsible thing. We've said licensed operator. They went through their test, they got their license from the state says, okay, you can drive a car. Now in this room, we are determining that this licensed operator can operate only a certain type of vehicle and not a golf cart, but it's still a licensed operator.
Well, in the state of Wisconsin, you can't operate a golf cart on Highway 50. You can't operate a golf cart to go to work and go down, other roads. So you're comparing an orange to a grapefruit.
On the roads path,
Not legally by the state of Wisconsin.
but we're having.
They can by ordinance,
But
not legally by the state of Wisconsin.
with a driver's license from any state.
With an ordinance, not the state.
It's written on. the
Right,
ordinance that
so
says-
they cannot get in their golf cart and drive down Highway 50. I can't take my golf cart and go to work because it's illegal.
Well, we-
I'm a licensed driver, so under that logic, me being a licensed driver, I should be able to get in my golf cart and I should be able to drive it to work. But you're using that logic, and I'm telling you that logic doesn't work.
My logic is the license, but we are, in our village, we're requiring someone with a license from any state. They must have a license to operate the golf cart within the village. But we are sitting here saying that 8-year-olds are driving. Well, this could be true. But for our ordinance, 8-year-olds cannot drive. Only a licensed driver can. If a licensed driver wants to go drive out in the snow, they're gonna go drive out in the snow. I personally would love to see a golf cart drive into a snow emergency. I think it would be probably pretty hilarious because it's not gonna go anywhere. The tires are too wide, it's not heavy enough. If you really stick it to
And
the
actually, Bob, I'm glad you put it down. I was hoping that somewhere along the line, golf carts in ice and snow are not the optimal condition. So I'm glad you kind of brought that up, and that's another contingent on why we said you can't use it anymore. So I've obviously, in asking a simple question, it's turned into a complex. So with that being said, I rescind my request to change the date, and I say I stay from April 1st to November. Now, is there anybody that strongly disagrees with that? We just move on. We've spent way too much time on this, folks. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So in other words, then, the consensus of the board was that we would make an allowance for golf cart use at 248 and 236, and that there's no other changes to the board. So you'll have that change for Wednesday.
Yes.
You also got a ATV snow removal thing. I think that was in everybody's pack. The reason that came up is Trustee Garland had asked specifically whether it was legal to plow driveways with ATVs. So the state's already addressed that. The concern was, do we need to draft that into an ordinance? The state's already got it covered, so we can't draft anything that the state already has. I mean, we can mimic it, we can't restrict it. Okay, moving on. We Energy's assessment request. This is concerning the community library. If you look, there's just a little sliver, a pie-shaped sliver that they need to get as an easement to move a pole. Excuse me, and that's because of the new ATC ATC tower that's there. So there is no. I always kind of get a kick out of these agreements that they throw at us for good and valuable consideration. Yeah, do you want power? That's your consideration. We'll give you power. So there's no monetary value to this other than we get power. So does the board have any concerns about this? If not, we'll have a motion for, I believe, me and Michelle to sign.
I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there any questions on that? Okay. All right, Wistock Crosswalks maintenance agreement. When Highway 50 gets reconstructed, there'll be the addition of 2 new crosswalks. One is right in front of Westosha Floral. And the other is just east of County Road F. And the agreement is that they'll put them in, we have to maintain. Any questions on that? That's just a matter of agreeing to this. Okay. All right. Public Works, Trustee Spencer.
Mark, you want to take it away?
You bet. O'Reilly Auto Parts has wrapped up their construction of the retrofitting the stormwater basin. They've got a little paperwork to do again with the volume verification easement. They are also working on connecting to the water system out there, so that's good news. We've spent some time working with Dodd Construction on final lien waivers, going back and forth on that for a while. Hopefully they get all that stuff wrapped up into the village. Whitetail Ridge, they've started construction within the subdivision for the last couple of weeks now, and today we started on the sanitary sewer crossing County F. You drive that way, you'll see that. So they're progressing with the underground utilities now. The Village Hall water main, we are awaiting a DNR permit. We're waiting for review by USDA. We're still working on wrapping up the electrical design. We got a some pump going in the vault there, so take care of that. And the easement document, we're also working on that. That's my report.
One, if I may, I appreciate your substantial time at no cost to you.
We have spent a lot of time, yep, I know we're
Yeah, I know. It's-
beyond the end of that project and we're still working on it, so.
Yep, and I'm sure the board appreciates it.
We want to get it done right.
The name of the game.
The next item we got is a driveway repair that was damaged by a water main break on 63rd. The repair was actually gonna happen next year.
Correct.
But the property owner, from what I read correctly, must be having his whole driveway repaid, the $1,200 is our portion.
Correct. He found somebody that could do it this year. It's a little bit more money, but we were still obligated to do some kind of a path for him this season. And then pay for our portion of the repair of his, basically the apron next year. So as a result of him finding somebody, of course, cost was a little higher, and it would have been, we could have waited till next year. The savings is that we didn't have to do anything to bridge that gap and cover that travel in the winter months. So essentially, we did save money by moving forward.
There's actually no action on this. It's going to be in the bills over $1,000.
Yes, I had hoped that I would have gotten the invoice before the bills over $1,000 were passed around. We have not gotten an invoice from Tip Top. I called them up a message today. We have the proposal. We will get in touch with them and get that written invoice. But yes, to answer your question, yes.
The next one is,
Well, I'm sorry. So do we want to still do we still want to have a motion contingent on receipt?
I would think so. That cleans it up. That's a good point, President Burns. Instead of waiting until December to get the invoice and pass it through with bills over $1,000, if you'll grant the approve the motion, then it's up to staff when we do get up to that amount when we get the invoice paid.
Yeah, this gentleman worked well with the village to correct this issue. It wasn't his fault that
Right.
we had to disturb his driveway, certainly. There was a definite benefit to him having his driveway done at the same time, but he was fair and equitable in saying, look, I realize I'm getting a betterment out of this. And I would appreciate it if we were just maybe a contingent upon receipt. Sorry.
no, I'm fine, it's beautiful. So then we will have a motion to have this paid once upon receipt. Next one is Baxter Woodman, work order for 2021 road improvement projects. This is just going to be to give authorization to the engineering staff to get started on upcoming projects. Sounds all right.
Yes, that's correct.
Anybody have questions about that?
Question. Mark, I know what reimbursable allowances, but is that for like sundry expenses?
Mileage.
Mileage. Okay,
Mileage. So we have a flat rate for our survey crew, $65 a day for travel expenses, but this is basically mileage.
okay. Thank you.
That's all I have for
Trustee Spencer, if I could just point out that this came up as a discussing point, I don't know if it was last month or the month before, about some of the streets being in need of repair, one of them being 72nd Street. The engineers have suggested, and we'll see this in the plan set, at the meeting with the paving engineer from Baxter Woodman, and looking at 72nd Street, he and or Mark had a great idea, and that is instead of reconstructing, spending thousands and thousands of dollars to reconstruct the side of that between the existing channel and the pavement, is to put a concrete ribbon, not necessarily a curb, but it would act somewhat as a curb, a formed concrete ribbon all along 72nd Street and paving up to that, with the ability for that concrete to be tipped in certain areas at the low spots to get the water off, and that's the reason the road is in condition, is water sits on it, is to get the water off the road and into the channel where it belongs, or away from the road. And I think it's a wonderful idea. Mark can, and Gary Vogel came up with. It'll save us money and it technically will last a long period of time and not impact those who live on the street or use the channel. The alternative was to build it up, to get the road base higher so that the water will drain. That would have had an effect on driveways across the street. It's just a,
Putting in a flat curve.
yeah, it's a great idea. Explain a little bit on that.
Curb without the curb head sticking out.
Yeah.
That's all.
How well does that hold up with it being as close to
So
the channel?
typically, they're
as that?
about 9 inches thick,
Okay,
so it's got some substantial support there to help hold the road and hold the main back, so
Which reinforced rebar,
I'm not sure about whether to put rebar necessarily, but
or on that for, water edge.
that can be done.
Is that gonna be a 9-inch thing to step over to get to the pier?
No, no, that's how,
Okay.
it would be dug out that deep.
Okay,
It would be relatively flat across. You want to drainage to continue into the channel.
right,
You don't want to
living
stop
on
the
that street, I appreciate
This is a very good fix for a road that we really didn't think we had an answer for except massive reconstruction. So, and then we won't be dealing with shouldering and keep the water off the surface of the road. Could last a very long time. Thank you, Mark, for that idea.
Judiciary and license.
I have a court report on Wednesday. We did get a late license that didn't make it for the agenda here. We got back the, what's that?
This,
Background check.
oh,
It's a little shady, so we've given it to Jeff to take. I'd like Jeff to take a look at it before.
I can't see her.
Oh,
Yes, I agree.
so that will be on Wednesday.
so this-
That's
a
a
liquor license.
liquor license.
For an applicant, oh, the server's license?
Bartender's license.
Bartenders, okay. Okay. Sounds like a promising read. Okay, police and fire.
We met, Kim, President Burns, and Jeff and I met about 2 weeks ago to discuss the contract for the fire and rescue. You want to take it from there?
We're going to discuss that.
That's a
closed
closed
session.
session. Closed session.
Yeah.
Then I have nothing to report.
Closed session. Health, welfare, and recycling, trustee Garland.
All right, real quick, regarding the fall leaf pickup, it's rapidly happening due to the better than expected temperatures this fall. There's been a large amount of leaves collected, about 965 cubic yards of leaves picked up through November 6th. They were backlogged a little bit from rains, the rains of on October 19th through the 23rd, but they have caught up. And they expect to be ahead of schedule as the fall cleanup will go through December 4th, assuming everything is still on target.
Correct.
Weather-wise. Correct. And then I've got, we received an application from the Sharing Center for a charitable donation. In the past, as recently as last year, the village donated about $918 to the Sharing Center. And they are, again, requesting some kind of donation as I'm looking at the funds available, because we did not have a July 4th event, and obviously we're not going to have Christmas event. There's about $2,700 available for donations. I guess this is up for discussion in terms of how much we should donate. I think we should, given time and the organization, we should, with the funds, go beyond the 918 that we donated last year. But the amount, I would leave up for discussion.
I got something to say about this. I have one totally against this. And we have just had this discussion in budget meetings that we literally have no money and raising taxes and trying to figure out how to give employees money. And now we're going to take our constituents, taxpayers' dollars and donate it to another politician because she is a politician, which I'm not even sure how that's ethical. We're going to ask the village that she represents money. I'm sorry, I just can't see how we can ethically give to the sharing center anymore, being that she's our supervisor. She shouldn't even be asking the village for money. The village doesn't, our residents don't have any money. We just had a discussion on how our residents are sitting at home without a job. And we're up here in the Ivory Castle going, oh, let's give some money to the sharing center. If we have $2,783 over, then it should be rolled back over into the general fund. And maybe next year we can cross that bridge of donating money. But right now, I just don't see how we can sit here and donate money when our residents are not working.
If some of our
Trustee
residents are using it.
Trustee Christian.
If I can just shed a little light on it. We have a policy for donations because of the survey that we've done. In the past, it was donations that anything left over in this recreational budget then could be considered for donations. So that is why they requested. The Kiwanis has requested it in the past for fireworks. The sharing center has requested it to assist because we do have residents that use the sharing center. But we've only ever donated anything we've had left in this budget. So last year, that's why it was 900, because that's all we have left in the budget. So the sharing center is following our policy in requesting this. So that I hope answers some of your questions as to why we do it. This money has already been budgeted. It was budgeted for community events that fall under health, welfare, and recycling. And anybody, any nonprofit organization can put in a request for a donation. We've had the tennis association at one time had come to the village for a donation. We've had the high school at one point, some of their organizations come for a donation, and we've done those.
Oh, I'm not agreeing that we've donated money in the past. I'm just saying that I don't see how I can stand next door, look at my neighbor Pete and say, well, sorry, Pete, we gave money to the donation center, but we did increase your taxes. Well, you're okay. And he's gonna say, thanks, Vince. And that's my point, is what I'm trying to make. We were just here a couple of weeks ago, looking at a budget that had no room in it. $0. And then we're not a week later donating money to the sharing center.
This is the budget
And this
from
isn't
last
our
year.
money. So if
This is last year.
I will ask that if any trustee is going to vote for donating money to the sharing center, then they should match that donation themselves. And that way they can say, we donated the village money, but I backed it with my own money. So that way you can show that, we should show to our constituents that you truly support with your own money what you're doing.
Okay, then I would request that we donate $1,200 because my $1,200 stimulus check, I did donate to the church. And I have the receipt to prove it. So I'll do that. I'll take your thing. So that would be my recommendation is $1,200 to $1,500 because I'll donate another $3.
Trustee Wall.
Actually, Kathy said it very well, is what I wanted to say.
that our residents probably do use the sharing center. And I just feel that it's worthwhile. Even if our residents didn't use it, I think it should go to the sharing center, and I don't think she's doing it on behalf of herself.
Anybody else? Oh, Scott?
I feel like the argument that times are tough now is, in my mind, even more supportive of the need to make this donation, because like you mentioned, it is leftover from last year. It's not additional money, but the budget we just hashed out the other night, but additional money left over, and, you know, there are people in our community that are struggling, and money left over, I think, is possible.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, couple things. True, we have a policy for just unspent funds in this particular account to act as a charitable donation to those that apply for that. It's an advisory, which means it can either be utilized or it could be utilized for what the board feels is more fulfilling of that additional money. So just because you ask for it, there's no guarantee that you get it, just whether you're one or two or whatever. So the second thing is, and it's Trustee Spencer hinted on it, but the main concept is not being mentioned here, is that the sharing center receives funding in your county budget. So you're essentially supporting the sharing center in your county portion of your property tax. So you're already donating to the sharing center in a way, along with every other community. So we're talking about over and above the amount that you already support the sharing center with. So this brings me to the question, and I emailed Supervisor Palmerville, who is the executive director of the sharing center. And also, as Trustee Spencer pointed out, our county board supervisor. I asked her that in preparation of tonight's meeting, it would be helpful to know, to provide complete transparency to everybody, how much money they received last year and how much money is in the budget, which they've all seen a draft on, for this year. I sent her that email on Sunday. I knew, just the way politics are, I knew I would not get an answer until probably 5:30 tonight. So I could say, I never got an answer, so she could say, I sent you an answer. Well, I got the email at 25 after 5 tonight. And the answer was, I don't know. I'm the executive director, but I don't know. I've looked at the 300+ page budget for the county from 2020, and it is not specifically line itemed in there. So it is a sub-account of some other account. It's just kind of a little general note. We're going to give this much to the sharing center. So what's the response that Sharon sent me is basically she's giving it to another individual at the county saying, how much money did we get from the county last year? Actually, she's going, I didn't ask her for the last 5 years, but she said for the last 5 years. And oh, by the way, how much money did the county exec set aside for funding for 2021 budget? Again, they've seen this draft. She votes on a budget where she's getting money. That is a pure definition of conflict of interest. It's also a conflict of interest in the fact that she is our county board supervisor, and we're giving money to her organization. The optics of it are about as bad as you could possibly paint. I think that if we're to be concerning of other people's money, in light of the fact that we are running a very lean budget for 21, again, this is money coming out of 2020. So it doesn't, the numbers we talked about at workshop, yeah, this was already set in stone a year ago. I would say that the direct way to do it, given the fact that one, we already contribute to the sharing center through county tax. Two, the executive director is our county board supervisor. And three, she has no clue how much she's gotten in the past or is getting in 2021 in a budget she's already seen. And three, we were having a conversation last month of a request that we have to put in streetlights. And we were wondering, where are we going to get that money? We were going to introduce a capital improvement fund so that in 3 years we could get that money to do it. We were required to do it, so it's no passing the buck we're not doing it. We were required to do it, it's just we were given time to do it. I would say the more pertinent thing to do here is to take that $2,700, do a budget transfer when we do our budget transfers in the 2021 budget. That money goes directly into the capital improvement fund to start funding those streets. Because then it comes down to, is it public safety or is it giving money to an organization that is run by our county board supervisor? That's the way most people are going to see it. You cut through all the politics of this stuff, and that's the optics of this. And I don't want this board involved in bad optics. That's my 2 cents. What's everybody think?
If I can,
Absolutely.
I will agree with you. It does look a little bit different with her being our county executive. That I will agree on. But what I won't agree with is we had a survey where we asked our residents if they supported donations to the sharing center, and our residents did say yes, knowing that they were paying the taxes. So there's where I do differ with you. I would like to see the email that you sent her asking for that information, only because last year when she put in a request for a donation, she was given the complete runaround asking for all of these things. She supplied it, she supplied it, she supplied it. So I'm not accusing you of any, but I would like to see how that was worded and why she answered the way she did. Personally, because I find it hard to believe that Sharon does not know how much money, or couldn't have gone to a file to find out how much money she received from the county last year.
That would be my expected answer too.
Right.
How come
So
we can't do it?
again, I would like to, find out more information about that. But I do agree that unfortunately she is our county supervisor, so that will look not so good.
The optics are bad.
Yes, and that part of it I do have to agree with.
I came prepared because I knew a question like this was going to come up. I will read you the email. I will read you the response. I will show you this after the meeting. I emailed to her, with Sharon, your request for funding donation to the Sharing Center will be on our November committee of the whole agenda. In preparation of our discussion and to provide complete transparency to the village board and our residents, can you provide me with the amount contained within the 2021 Kenosha County annual budget earmarked as financial assistance for Sharing Center operations? Also, if this amount saw an increase between the 2020 adopted budget and the yet to be approved 2021 budget. Thank you. Signed it as Terry Burns, Village President of Village of Paddock. The answer I got at 5:25 this afternoon is not an answer to this, but a CC to a Karen Steigerwald with a Kenosha County email address. I don't know what she does, unless that's Karen that works at the county exec's office. I don't know Karen's voice. It says, Karen, can you provide dates and amounts of funding the sharing center has received from the county exec in the last 5 years? Has the county exec set aside funds for the sharing center for 2021? That was her response, and she signed it, Sharon Powell, Kenosha County Supervisor, District 20. It's very simple to see what's going on here. There's a conflict of interest. She's playing the middle ground. She's acting like she knows nothing about this, and she's asking for information that she knows. As Trustee Christensen pointed out, you got the money. You know exactly how much money you got. You know exactly how much money pending county board approval. It hasn't been approved yet. I think their meeting is this week or next week. So she's playing both sides of the fence. Why is she playing both sides of the fence? She has to. She's our county board supervisor and the executive director of the same organization that's asking for money. So, I mean, if that ain't a big enough red flag, I can't build one big. So that answers your question on the email. I do also want to say, because she didn't answer my question, or she didn't respond, this afternoon I called our past county board supervisor, John Poole. And we all know that John Poole was a hawk on the county budget. And I asked him, John, what was the amount that the county board approved for the sharing center in 2019? He had an effect on 2019. And he said, well, I was told it was somewhere between 25,000 and 40,000. But I had asked the budget director for that exact amount and never got a response. So there's something going on here. We're breaking into something that the county does not want to disclose, and they don't like me asking questions. That's why we're getting the brush off and we're pushing it off to somebody else. So if that isn't, again, that's a big red flag. That's even more reason to just say, I'm sorry, Sharon, we're not giving you the money. We're going to redirect it to a streetlight project, which we feel is more beneficial to our public. End of story. I think that's the way to do it. The board doesn't look like it's playing favorites, which it will look like you're playing favorites. Because if you're going to suggest that you're going to give $2,700 to the sharing center without earmarking how that's going to be used, if you look at the way their budget is formed, it's nothing short of a 5-year-old running a lemonade stand. You got money coming in, and it could be used to pay for Ms. Palmerville's wages, retirement, health insurance. How do you think that would look? Now you're giving a direct benefit, if that isn't a conflict of interest. So again, the best way for the board acting as a representative for upwards of 3,000 people's taxpayers' money is to simply say, thank you, but no thanks. We're going to walk away from this. If you weren't on the county board, we could dismiss that whole aspect and we could look at it in a different light. Everything else, would still stay static. It's in your county, money and everything else. But that's the big sticking point. Bob hit it right on the head. There's a big conflict of interest. So again, I don't want any of you to look bad to the public. I want us to do what our job is, and that is to direct their money to the best use for their purpose. And I think that's when we do our fund transfers in the first quarter of 2021. Let's take that 2783. Let's put it in that capital improvement fund for those lights. Comments?
Sounds good to me. I'm for it.
I'll say the conflict of interest is a problem.
Okay. All right, thank you. So that's, we will, this might be a Tim Jeff question. If we're denying the contribution, do we want to formalize that in a motion? Or just say,
Just don't
sorry,
put it on the agenda.
what's that?
Just don't put it on the agenda.
Okay, so just simply write her a letter saying, I'm sorry, we're not giving you any money.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll get that done.
And don't
I need to
mention,
elaborate.
don't mention a conflict of interest, because that's really not, that, I understand your concerns, but that's not for us to make a judgment on. It's a conflict between the county and the organization, not between us and the organization.
okay. All right, so Tim, you'll draft that.
I will.
All right. All right, good thing. All right, thank you. Building and grounds.
I have nothing at this point.
The Tree commission. Okay. Administrators report.
I do have a couple things to report. A reminder that the funeral services for a village court clerk, Cliff Stramick, will be this coming Saturday, November 14th at Daniel's Funeral Home in Burlington from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. I understand that it's a socially distanced, we've got it laid out in such a way that if you do attend, to pay your respects to Michelle, his wife, and still have social distance. The village has sent not a bouquet of flowers, but a basket of fruit to the Stramick home. That was on Wednesday, or no, last week, no, Friday. And we will send a plant or flower arrangement to the Daniels Funeral Home for the Stramick family.
Are you,
Yes, sir.
as far as donations into that?
There is funds available, and we've done this before for active employees that passed, or family members of active employees, and it comes out of the operational expense out of the administrative fund. Next week, there's a budget hearing, really a public hearing. Before you, I've given you some information. Finalized after our budget workshop, the finalized general fund budget, the finalized sewer fund budget, and the finalized water fund budget are included in that. Something that we didn't necessarily go over, and it's very difficult to go over this in advance of the mill rate being established from the county. The mill rate for the TID districts, for Onion District, is established after all the taxing entities provide their levy to the county. They calculate, come up with a mill rate for that community. It's virtually impossible to do before we pass ours and all the other entities pass theirs. So in your packet, there are two budgets that are TID district budgets. The true estimates, if they are drastically different from what the estimate is, we'll come back in December or January and amend those. I'm asking that those be approved next month. I'm sorry, next week with the other budgets. So those will be on the agenda. The packets are in your mailbox, or you may have already picked them. Tonight's meeting was recorded, and it will be set to YouTube tomorrow morning sometime, and the public will be able to watch our meetings on YouTube in the future. Yes.
And it's being sponsored by Lux Soap.
Yeah, okay. That's all I have, President Burns.
Okay. Attorney's report?
I have only one thing of substance, but I want to explain my comments that I just made a couple minutes ago. Elected officials have to be very careful about the comments they make in order to avoid liability. There's currently a lawsuit that is ongoing, which includes, as one of the defendants, your former supervisor, Mr. Poole, based upon social media comments that were made. And the problem is the allegations are intentional conduct. Okay, you intentionally slandered, defamed, or whatever, and there's no insurance coverage for that. So you want to make sure that if you're making a declination of any sort of request, in this case from the sharing center, just decline. Don't do it without commentary. My only comment of substance was I just wanted to express my condolences to Michelle and her family. I did not realize until this morning when I read the paper that Cliff had passed away. So that was it.
Thank you. Inputs, concerns?
I got something from the bunch.
Yes.
I received a message from a resident who sent me pictures of some graffiti that was on the bench over by McConan Park by the public fishing spot that read explicit D Trump and ACAB, which is initials for all cops are bastards. And my question is, would we at some point be in a spot to put up some kind of trail cams around the local parks to catch?
That's a possibility.
Something like this.
We were aware of the graffiti happened over the weekend on the park property, on the slides and so forth. Monday morning I'd say by 8:30, 9 o'clock, the majority of it was removed. It's difficult to get graffiti, paint, spray paint off of ABS plastic, but our staff took care of that right away. We didn't find out about the graffiti on the bench at the fishing, handicap fishing pier until this morning. We did the best we could to get it off. We're going to literally have to replace these slats on that bench. At least you can't read it. It's paint, but you can't read what it is at this point. To answer your question about trail cams, we do have 3 trail cams in the village presently. They're at our recycling stations. One of the issues with trail cameras is in putting up any type of image capturing camera in a park. You're capturing the image of children in a park. Children use the park, and the intent is not to capture that. Obviously, the intent, and our attorneys talked to me in detail about this, the intent is to capture the individual violating whatever rules it is, damaging whatever. But inadvertently, there's other pictures being captured as well. And I'll let Jeff explain a little bit more about this, but we're obligated to keep those pictures virtually ever. That it's like an evidence issue that we have to keep. The cost to have surveillance and also then to store all this, and then whether or not we would even capture someone. I like the idea, but I just don't know that the one-off would work like that. We were requested by our insurance carrier, President Burns and I just talked about it Friday. We were requested by our insurance carrier after we had a slip and fall during the not the election, but the in-person election, and our insurance carrier asked us to consider putting up surveillance, essentially making his job easier, or the adjuster's job easier, to deny the claim. Once again, we need to Jeff to explain the significance of having cameras.
Well, it's the first thing is you want to make sure you have coverage, and just to elaborate on what I just said a moment ago. If there's alleged to have been an intentional act, the village insurance carrier is not going to cover you. So that means you have to go back to your own liability insurance. And frankly, most personal liability insurance coverages, whether it's your homeowner's insurance or whether you've got an umbrella coverage, also deny coverage for intentional acts, okay? So you want to make sure that, you know, in the case of what we were just discussing before about comments that might be interpreted to be adverse, that, you know, you don't want to allege anything that could possibly be interpreted as being anything other than negligence, you know, as opposed to intentional conduct. I think that anytime you do something like the camera situation, you want to make sure that your insurance company is on board with that program, and you get a letter from them saying, yes, this, you know, we agree that this would be appropriate, because then if for whatever reason, because it's a child that's captured, because there's whatever the allegation might be, the insurance company is pretty much on the hook at that point by saying, you know, we agreed that you guys could do this, and we're going to provide coverage. And, you know, frankly, in most instances, it's not the liability itself, the indemnity coverage, it's the defense costs that are going to kill you, because a lot of these claims are just, you know, nonsense anyway. But, you know, the defense costs could run into tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay, the ins and outs of the program. Okay, very good. All right, we're going to be going into closed session, so the audience is going to get to wish you good evening.
Oh.